Hello and welcome to the Voice of Intuition podcast. My name is Susan Jane and I believe that trusting your intuition is the best way to live your life with meaning and purpose. Each week you will hear about how you can connect, develop and trust your intuition through the wonderful array of guests we have on the show and my own personal experiences. Join me to understand how your intuition can guide you towards a life full of meaning and loving purpose. Hello and welcome to the Voice of Intuition podcast. I'm Susan Jane, your host for the podcast. And today this episode is all about trusting the process. Now we've talked about the scissor energy. We've talked about the symbolism of the scissors. I'm going to go into that a little bit more, how we can cut away those things that we don't need. But today it's all about trust because we have those areas that we need to look at. Now, I know I've had moments in my life when I've found myself gripping tightly onto something that is sort of slipping away, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, or even a vision. I know I had a really big vision that I saw I wanted to achieve, and I sort of felt like it was drifting away from me. And I remember fighting and trying to hold on to it and believing if I just tried a bit harder, it'll all be the same or it'll all work out. But it didn't. And often it doesn't. The more we hold on to it, the more often it slips through our fingers. And a lot of that is because we're not trusting the process. We're not trusting the process of how our life is supposed to be unfolding. We're trying to hold on to what we know, what we're aware of, what we feel comfortable with, and we're not allowing the process to move on. I remember a long time when I was in my marriage still, and the old trust the process of life to take care of me. I would use that mantra. I trust the process of life to take care of me. And I'd do that when I was walking. And it was a way of me sort of going, I don't have to control everything. I don't have to make everything work. I need to sometimes allow the process to start working by itself. And these are part of the 3 steps. The 3 steps is allow, open, and experience. They're the 3 steps that we're going to be talking about too. But trusting the process can feel really hard. And the main reason why it can feel really hard is because of that uncertainty. I know I crave control. I know I do. I know I seek assurance in what I do. But life isn't always about that. It isn't always about having to be in control of everything. And this is where that fear starts to come in. Fear of the unknown, fear of making the wrong choices, fear of being alone. You know, we can stay in a relationship just for that fear in itself, for being alone. And it's these fears that keep us stuck, keep us playing the same patterns, keep us refusing to move on or to let go. And this is where we need to trust. Now, you can imagine in a relationship, if you've had a situation in a past relationship where you've lost that trust, you bring that into the next relationship and already you're starting on the back foot. So we need to assess all those areas before we move on to the next relationship. And the other aspect is, again, I go back to the law of attraction, like attracts like. If you're putting out there that you distrust something or I don't trust that person, or I don't trust this, or I don't trust that, then you're putting that out there as well. So you're actually putting out something that you're going to be attracting back in. And that's not what you need. We need to make sure we're moving out of that. And unfortunately, trust is really, really very significant, obviously, in a relationship. And this is where we can have some of our major problems. I know of a couple that have both come into a relationship, both had experienced distrust in a relationship, and they've come together and straight away they distrust each other. They hadn't worked on those patterns. They hadn't worked on the situation. They hadn't worked on their responses. They hadn't worked on themselves enough to understand what it was all about before they came together. And so they've had to do that within the relationship. Now, for a while there, that relationship went quite wobbly, quite wonky. They ended up moving apart again, and they've actually come back together and they seem to be working through those areas there. There was lots of triggers in there. There's lots of things that were happening, and it's nice to actually see that they are seeing those, they're reflecting back on those and getting an understanding of what that is and where they are. But distrust in a relationship or trust in a relationship is really, really tough. One of the first areas that you need to look at is basically trusting yourself. Now, I do a whole big program on trust mastery, I call it. There's a whole big program on it. It might not be up on the website yet because I'm actually tweaking it at the moment and redoing it. But intuitivenature.com.au is my website. But trust is really, really strong. And the majority of times it's about not trusting yourself. And when we say not trusting yourself, it's really not really being connected to your intuition. Now, I know that when you're in a relationship, there's a lot of people that sort of say, I had no idea that they were doing that. I tend to question that because I believe that they do know there's something going on, but they may not know what it is. So intuitively, they're picking up those messages that something's not going on, but they're not trusting themselves. They're not trusting their messages. They're not trusting that understanding to bring that forward and do something about it. So that's where their trust starts to fall down. That's where their trust starts to go downhill quite rapidly. So when we look at trust, and again, it's really all about you trusting yourself, because once you start to trust yourself and you start to trust the intuitive information that's coming through, then you will get a better understanding of what's happening. You may not know exactly what's happening, but you know it doesn't feel right. And that's your first sign to say, not to point the fingers and say they're doing something wrong, but to point the fingers back to yourself and go, well, why am I feeling that? What's going on? What is it all about? And getting a clearer understanding of it. Now, later on, I've done the same myself. I'm thinking, I just don't know about that person, not necessarily in a relationship, but somebody else. I'm just not sure. It doesn't feel quite right. Only to find, and I've pulled back, only to find later on that I was right in how I was feeling, because it was, they proved to be correct. They proved to be correct. I trusted myself and I pulled back thinking, I'm not going that way. It doesn't feel right. So trust, again, is all about it coming back to you. And that's the main thing. That's the main thing we're going to go through. Now, this is just the overall about the process, trusting the process. This is the first bit. This is how we're going to go. And when the next 3 blogs that come out, or next 3 podcasts that come out, will be about these 3 pillars of trust, and we will go deeper into them. My idea here is to actually give you the tools that you can work on to help you start moving forward in a positive manner. But I need to give you that overarching aspect of it so you know what we're talking about, because the next podcast will be about how you give yourself permission to release those resistance. The next one after that would be about opening, and that's opening yourself to new possibilities. And then finally it'll be about experiencing, and that's about being fully present in your journey. Now, I can give you those ideas. Hey, you've got them there. They're done now. Allow yourself the permission to release resistance. I've just told you that. You've got that understanding. But if you really want to know how to do that, because that's not always so easy, that's when we start to go, okay, I want to really break that down for you. And I'll just give you an understanding on that. So by allowing, what we would do is we would set energetic boundaries, we would release control, and we would practice self-awareness. And I will walk you through each one of those areas so you know exactly what you're doing to be able to allow that process to come through. Because if we don't trust the process to look after us, then who are we trusting? And that's all about trusting ourselves, because we're going to get that intuitive information to guide us, to help us through. So we talked about the symbolism of the scissors, and that's what this is all about. So I was given this information about the powers that we have. And these powers are powers that are going to take us from the 3D to the 5D. Now, I don't know if you've heard anyone talking about it, but we're meant to be moving in this new age. We're meant to be moving from 3D to 5D. Not all of us are going to get there. Take that on board. Not all of us are going to get there. until we do some of this work that I'm putting forward. Now, what happened was I remember thinking to myself, like, everyone's talking about this 5D and all the rest of it. And, they say we have to be more enlightened and we have to do this. But nobody's telling us how to actually do that. No one is explaining how to do that. And I had a very large, what I call a download, this information come to me one morning, and it was called the powers. And they gave me this information about the first power. They told me all about the powers, how we actually already have the power within us. We just need to be able to utilize it and express it. And it's like our inner strength and our power. And then they said, the first power I'm going to give you is scissor power. Now, I sort of went, okay, fine. And they said, we're not giving you any more until you have broken this right down in the way that I nerdily do it, because I'm quite analytical, quite nerdy in that context. And I did remember asking and saying, well, how come you've asked me to do this? And they said, there's not just me, there's quite a few people that are bringing this information forward, and they're bringing it forward because they bring it forward in their own way. They bring it forward in their expertise, in their way of doing things. I am quite analytical, and so I'm bringing it forward in a more structured, analytical way, because that's how I do things, and that's what I'm supposed to do. So I'm bringing you forward these powers. And again, the first one is scissor power, and we are up to the second section of scissor power, which is all about trusting the process. So as we trust that's what the scissors are, the symbols of scissors. It's about cutting away, opening up things, cutting away things that no longer serve us. It's about looking after our energy so we can move from the 3D to the 5D, fifth D, seamlessly. So that's how we are doing it. So again, the 3 powers of trust is allow. So the first part we're going to do is we're going to allow. We're going to give ourselves permission to release any resistance, okay? We're going to stop fighting about what is unfolding. We're going to stop worrying about what's happening and allow that process to work. Now, I want to explain a quick story on mine. I want it to be a short video this time, a short podcast this time, but I want to explain a little bit of my story so you can get an understanding of it. So in the allow section, I was running a health clinic. It was like a health clinic. So we were running massage, Reiki, running different things. I had a few staff members on, and it was a holistic health service. So we had little rooms and everything else there that people could come and they could have a healing, or they could have a massage, or they could have, whatever else they needed. I did readings as well. But I did a lot of spiritual healings then. I did a lot of hands-on healings, a lot of vibrational work, Bowen therapy, those sort of things. And I remember thinking, I just want to get out to a bigger audience. Now, you've got to remember, this was before the internet, basically. It was just starting to come into place. This is before the internet. And I kept on thinking, I want to get out to a bigger audience, and I don't know how. And the other aspect was, I wanted to not be doing all the manual work myself. I wanted to be able to go from an individual to a group, not an individual to individual, because I found that if I was working on somebody, I could do, say, 5 a day, and then the most would be 25 for the week. And that was it. That I was stuck there, and I wanted to reach more people. I don't know why. It was something innate in me that I needed to reach more people. So I stopped trying to create more clients. And I thought, no, I've got to look at it a different way. I've got to allow something else to happen. And my daughter came up and said, hey, Mum, why don't you go back to uni? At 48, why not? I went back to uni, and I must admit I was focusing on the health side of things, and I was focusing probably more on the eating, because we'd been on an organic crop farm for 10 years, and I was focusing more on that side of things. And anyway, she came up with this health promotion university degree, and I went, oh, I didn't think of that. And so I allowed the resistance to go. I sort of went, okay, let's be open to what goes. Let's see what happens. So I opened myself up to new possibilities. And I remember my girlfriend saying to me, if you're going into uni, how do you know you're going to get in there? Like you're not guaranteed a space or a spot. And I remember thinking, well, there was no fear. There was nothing there. It was like, well, if I don't get in for that course, I'll get in for something else. Maybe I'm not supposed to be there. So I allowed myself to release that resistance and just, I knew it was the right thing. Everything was lining up nicely. I knew it was the right thing to do. So I just did it. And then as I went along, somebody said to me, well, how are you going to afford that? And I went, oh, that's going to be challenging because I owned my own house, but I was paying off a mortgage and I was a single person by then. I was single by then. And I thought, I'm not sure how to do that. And then somebody else sort of said, how are you going to travel? You know, like everybody came up with these ideas. And as they asked me these questions, I just intuitively gave them answers. And somebody said to me, well, how are you going to do it? And I said, well, I don't have to live here. I could move and go to university and rent my house out. And all of a sudden, being open to these new possibilities allowed me to shift my energy and allowed me to look for new doors and new connections. And as soon as I said, oh, I could move and go to university, I thought of the Gold Coast because I was living up further north. I thought I could move to the Gold Coast. There's nothing stopping me from doing that. I could put renters in my house. I could move, that way. And I knew somebody on the Gold Coast who had a granny flat. I didn't know if it was empty, but I knew they had a granny flat. I thought, oh, there we go. Because the kids had all left home, I could do that. As I opened myself up to these new possibilities, new things started to come in. I phoned that guy up, phoned a couple actually, but I phoned the fella up that I knew. And yeah, he said, no, it's free. Come down. And we worked it all out and everything else. So all of a sudden, everything started to change and shift by me allowing that resistance to go, by opening myself up. And then once I was there, I experienced the journey in its full. So I allowed, I opened, and then I experienced it. I didn't rush it. I didn't have to hurry. I just wanted to grow and learn from it. So we can all do that. And that's what we're going to go through in the deeper things as we go back. So think about your life at the moment. Where are you gripping on too tightly? Where are you holding on too tight? And let us know how you're going with that. Because the next blog for the next week is, if you are holding on, we're going to tell you how you can allow yourself to release that resistance and how you can open up and go forward. That's what we're going to be talking about next week. But just on a side note to my uni degree, I did move down to the Gold Coast. I did do my uni degree. And as I said, all the ducks lined up. I knew I was supposed to be there. But get this, 6 months after I finished my 3-year degree, and I worked 3 part-time jobs while I was doing it, 6 months after I left it, the government in Queensland changed hands and they wiped out all the jobs that I had just spent 3 years and over $30,000 studying for. Now, I still owe that money, hasn't been paid yet. It will come out as I go along, or come out of my wherever. Something else will happen. I allowed it to come through. But all the jobs that I had studied for, which was a public health degree and in health promotion, so how to promote good health, they were all taken from the public health sector to the private health sector. Now, I was going for these jobs and everyone was saying, wow, you got so much experience. You got the top 5% in your classes. Rah, rah, you're so good. But people are getting the jobs because they've got more experience. And I'm thinking, where are they getting this experience from? And it wasn't until after that I found out that all the ones in the public sector had to move to the private. So they already had the experience, they were already in the jobs, and they were just moving across. So 3 years, changing my whole life around, putting a manager in my business, putting renters in my own home, leaving my family, my older kids that were up there, to start a whole new life. It was perfect for the 3 years until things changed. And I remember thinking how I was very devastated. I absolutely devastated. And I remember thinking how, tough that was. But in the same token, if I hadn't gone through that process, I wouldn't have learned how to use the computer properly. I wouldn't have learned how to use the recording properly. I wouldn't have known about podcasts. I wouldn't have known any of that. I wouldn't have written my book. And I've got another one on the way. So there's lots of reasons why we've been putting we've been put in those areas, and why we need to trust the process. But I'm running out of time, so I'm going to say goodbye for now. And I will catch you on the next one, which is all about allow. With that note, I'll say bye. See you guys.